But the project we're going to drill next is the Hot Springs Range project. And this project is actually what the company was formed on. So this was our listing property. And in my mind, as Paul said earlier, I think it's still really like the best shot at 10 million plus ounces.
The Financial Survival Network. Now more than ever. The Financial Survival Network.
And welcome. This is Financial Survival Network. I'm your host, Kerry Lutz. We have a major sponsor update from Eminent Gold, which is exploring the Great Basin in Nevada. And we're joined with CEO Paul Sun, mining engineer, extensive experience in capital markets, as well as the technical team, or most of it, Chief Geologist Dan McCoy, over 30 years experience in mining, as well as Justin and Ajeet to discuss the latest findings from the release. Paul, got the whole team here. A lot of things have been happening since we last spoke.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks very much, Kerry, for having us on. We really appreciate it. And, first to start off, I'll say that we've been pretty excited watching gold post good gains recently. And, we think it'll make new highs given U.S. inflation is running at a 40-year high, regardless of potential geopolitical risk around Ukraine. We think, more and more people are becoming risk averse and looking for gold exposure. And as you mentioned, we have a gold-centric portfolio. We have 4 high-impact, 100% owned properties in Nevada, the number one jurisdiction for gold exploration and development. And our first project that will be drilled in the coming months is the real lottery ticket in our portfolio, as it's never been explored before, and it's an analog to Twin Creeks and Turquoise Ridge, which collectively account for approximately 20 million ounces of gold. So, yeah, we've assembled the dream team of geos that are here. They have a fresh perspective on Nevada. We're all aligned and owning this story. And I think since we last spoke, which was in November, we put out positive soil results from our Gilbert South project that confirmed a multi-kilometer gold system where we're focusing on 3 primary targets there. In January, we announced that we doubled our district position at Spanish Moon and have potentially identified a new target there directly analogous to the Round Mountain mine, which is a 23 million ounce deposit. And just last week, we announced the results of our geophysics program at Gilbert South, which confirmed deep feeder structures coincident with the multi-kilometer vein system on the property. And I think Dan can take you through its significance.
Dan, it's great to see you again. I saw Eminent just put out a news release for Gilbert South and indicates that you are ready to pick drill sites there. Can you tell us what you like most about Gilbert South? And when we last spoke, we talked about technology, about going over all of these places that didn't appear to have much potential, but the technology has really changed that. And I assume this is an example of it.
Yes, it is. And I'll get to some of the techniques that we're using later. But first, the question is, what do I like about Gilbert South? And my answer to that is everything. First of all, I really like bonanza vein systems, mainly because, as you know, grade is king, and that's what these bonanza vein systems promise, is really good grades. They're mostly some of the most profitable type mine systems around the world, just because of those high grades. What I liked about Gilbert South is it's really a classic vein system in Nevada. It's very much, for one, well-behaved. There isn't like a lot of post-mineral faulting. For another, it's obviously had good grades. Even before we didn't take our own samples, the old-timers mined, quite a bit there. I mean, not huge operations, but enough to know that they were getting the kind of grades because they needed high grades. They were using burrows, but basically old-timers were high-grade, very small volume production. And of course, what we're looking for is high grade, big volume production. And I think Gilbert South gives us a good shot at it. Since we've been there, we've confirmed those grades. We're getting over an ounce per ton over width. We've confirmed that the structures have significant strike length. It's a big system. Those are the two things we really wanted to confirm that we could do on the surface. So we've mapped, we found big soil anomalies, And I would say the techniques that we use that haven't even been available in the last 10 to 20 years are two different things. One is a spectral analysis of the clays. We know from doing our research, and we have two of the best vein geologists working for us that actually worked at Fire Creek. We know those guys brought with them this technology that shows that if you have a certain composition clay, it's telling you two things. It's telling you have a big system, and it's kind of pointing you in the direction of, where you can start on that. The CSAMT is similar in a way. It's an electrical technique. So you're looking at the electrical resistivity, conductivity of the rock. When you put these two techniques together, it's really powerful. It's almost like looking at the plumbing in the house. If the old timers were looking at, the upper floor of the house and the very small pipes, what you're looking for is you're looking for the main feed, where that comes in. And what we're seeing from the CSAMT is we're seeing the kind of responses, electrical responses, that tells us that we're looking at multiple veins that coalesce, they come together, they're deeply penetrating. And so that really gives us what we need now. So now we know where's the best spot to drill the project based on spectral analysis, the CSAMT, and of course the more classical conventional techniques that we used as well. So we're really essentially ready to drill this project as soon as we can get permits. We've got the pads picked out. We've got everything we need. It's on Bureau of Land Management ground, so it shouldn't be hard to get the permits.
All right, and let's talk about the Hot Springs Range project. I understand that's going to be the first project that you drill this year, and tell us something about Justin and Ajeet Millard, who've been so instrumental in this.
Yeah, the Hot Springs Range project was our listing project. And it's essentially what I came out of retirement for, because I have never seen such a really good early stage Carlin type system. Basically, what Justin and Ajeet did, and I'm going to hand this over to them here shortly because they are the ones that originated this deposit. What they did is, while they were working on their PhD dissertations in 2019, 2020, they were also looking to apply what they had learned in their dissertations around Nevada, which is great because a lot of people who get PhDs, they never actually apply it. These guys were applying it before they even got them. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about, what their dissertations are, because I generally don't like to talk about PhD dissertations, but in this case, it's extremely relevant. Ajeet worked on the Long Canyon deposit. The Long Canyon deposit, I'm sure probably a lot of your listeners know about it, because it was really one of the biggest discoveries made in Nevada in the last 10 years. And, Newmont obviously saw that, took it over, and currently mining it. But it's not on one of the established trends. It wasn't where everybody goes to. It wasn't these lemming sites where everybody goes here because, well, you're on trend, right? What Ajeet saw at Long Canyon and applied to the Hot Springs Range project was that, well, what we really need is we need the same structures, and we need a good host rock. It doesn't have to be the exact same host rock. It just has to be right. And so at the same time, her husband, Justin, was finishing his project on low sulfidation epithermal systems and where they pop up around the Great Basin. And so together, they have a really complete gamut of knowledge for the kind of things we're looking for. And so without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to them because they will tell the story best.
All right. Well, Justin and Ajeet, it's great to have you on, and it's great to see people who actually make their educations pay off, hopefully rapidly upon graduation. The Hot Spring Range deposit, it's just 20 kilometers northwest of Nevada Gold Mine's Getchell Trend, and that has a total around 42 million ounces. Justin, what similarities do you see between Getchell and Hot Springs?
Hi, Kerry. Very nice to meet you, and a pleasure to be here. The question not only what similarities, but what did we see that others have missed, in my mind. The best way to describe this.
That was my next question, but that's okay. You can address them both.
And to be honest, they go hand in hand. And the features we saw are these similarities. And the best way to really describe this to the listeners is using an analogy. And the best analogy I could think of is think of the Earth's crust like an ice cube tray. And we think of an ice cube tray, and in north central Nevada, the Earth's crust is effectively made up of ice cube trays. And the Earth's crust is just the outer layer of rock. When you fill up an ice cube tray, think about pouring the water in. Well, in nature's ice cube tray, maybe we put a little grain of gold at the bottom of that tray, and the ice forms above it. And the real conundrum is how to get that gold out. I mean, think of an ice cube tray. You first take that tray out of the freezer, let it warm up a little bit. And you start melting the ice around the edges. Well, to get that ice out, what do you do next? You pick up that tray, and you flex it, and you twist it, and you actually strain the ice and cause ice to break apart from the edges of that tray. And when you do that, and the best case scenario, some of that early water that melted gets squeezed up to the surface and brings up the grain of the gold. The Earth's crust, effectively on a very large scale, behaves the same way. In the north central Nevada, the Battle Mountain and Carlin Trends are these north-south large structural corridors that behave like the long sides of an ice cube tray. And there's faults that go east-west in between them that form all the individual segments. Well, in geologic history, there's been 2 episodes where that crustal tray has warmed up, and there's been coinciding tectonic activity that has flexed it. And during those 2 episodes, we have formed a series of gold deposits. The first one, older one, was the series of Carlin-style deposits. And there was another period of warming that formed a series of epithermal deposits I focused on for my research. And what we recognized is that previously, most geologists believed the northern edge of that ice cube tray stopped at the Getchell Trend. And to the north of it, the next range, they didn't believe they had the right geologic features to form a Carlin deposit. There wasn't the right rocks, the right structures, or the right geologic history. What we recognize when we're pondering these things through the undergraduate school is you do have those features. There is the analogous structural fabric in the Hot Springs range, the right host rocks to host a gold type deposit for a Carlin system, and most importantly, you had the right thermal history and actual flexing of that tray to form a Carlin style deposit. The main difference in the Hot Springs range is there's a thin veneer of younger cover rocks that obscures most of the host rocks for Carlin style system. Fortunately for us, there's a very small portion on the western edge where that's exposed, and we identified it early on.
Really fascinating. And Ajeet, so you've been at exploration in Hot Springs for the past few years. In what ways did the exploration confirm your model?
Thanks for asking, Kerry. And the exploration, it has been great over the past few years. Our early stage exploration program, it consisted of 3 phases, really: mapping and rock chip sampling, a soil sampling campaign, and a geophysical survey. Our mapping and rock chip sampling program identified that there is the existence of 2 types of key structures that are really important to Carlin type deposits, and those are vertical feeder faults and sub-horizontal thrust faults, which we mapped at the surface. The soil and rock chip sampling campaigns also identified pathfinder geochemistry that's nearly identical to that found at the neighboring at the surface at neighboring Carlin type deposits. So the gold and the rock chip samples, as well as those geochemical fingerprints, effectively mimic the ore grade material that we see at deposits on the Getchell Trend. And the most anomalous rocks are the limestones and andesites, which was really exciting because those are the rocks that we consider the target host rocks in our exploration model. And then ultimately, the geophysical survey, CSAMT, kind of tied all those things together by providing a 3D visualization of our target faults, which coincided with a robust conductivity anomaly. And that supported our initial conceptual structural model as well as our surface mapping, which was really exciting. So in a nutshell, that really sums up our initial exploration results and how they coincide with our conceptual model.
And you've got permitted drill pads to drill at Hot Springs.
Yes, we do. And I'll let Justin kind of talk about those.
Yeah, it's very exciting, Kerry. We've permitted drill pads at our two primary target areas. There's the Otis area to the west and Eden to the east. And I'd be remiss not to point out that these two primary targets are 10 kilometers apart. So if we have success at one of these, we actually have the whole potential corridor in between to explore for. So it's a very large system we're looking at. The Lotus Target on the western side of the project area is where our two feeder fault systems intersect with both our host rocks and a thrust fault. And the exposed portion of this target occurs in the western shoulder of this system where this thrust fault comes out to surface, and we mapped it and sampled it. Our drill targeting is going to focus on the shallow portion at the western edge, then progressively move eastward to the deeper heart of the system. At the Eden target, it's the same setup. We have our intersecting feeder faults, and mapping and geophysics indicates we have the right host rocks and thrust fault at depth. The difference here at the Eden target is we have a thicker package of younger cover rocks obscuring most of the system. So we're going to focus on our geophysics and our structural model to target the intersection of these structures at depth.
Okay, that's really significant, and sounds like you're moving ahead. So, Paul, exciting times. How big do you think Hot Springs could be?
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously the big question. As we talked about, Hot Springs is a direct analog to Twin Creeks and Turquoise Ridge, which is 20 million ounces. It's on the other side of the Getchell and Battle Mountain, trend where they intersect, which is a 42 million ounce trend. So, in short, it could be huge. I'll tell you, hitting there, I think would truly change Nevada. I think it would create attention around the world. I can't tell you how excited we are to drill it. As mentioned at the outset, it's really the lottery ticket in the portfolio. I can't believe that no one has explored it in the history of Nevada. So yeah, time will tell soon enough. But the signature, as Justin mentioned, is it could be quite large. So we'll see.
Well, that could be a major lift in stock price. So far, like Eminent, like all explorers out there, is receiving a giant yawn. Or perhaps we might even call it malicious indifference from the stock market. But this could be a game changer.
Agreed. Absolutely.
All right. Well, we're going to be following the story closely, especially because we're shareholders as well. I suggest everybody go over to eminentgoldcorp.com. That's eminent with one M, goldcorp.com. Sign up for notifications, ticker symbols in the U.S., EMGDF, and of course in Canada, EMNT. Thanks everybody for coming on, giving us an update. I've really been watching this story closely, one of my favorite holdings, and I'm sure we'll be talking again soon. So thank you all so much.
Thanks again, Kerry.
Thank you very much, Kerry.
Thanks, Kerry.
The Financial Survival Network.